A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I take refuge in Allah from Satan, the outcast. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise and thanks belong to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Was salatu was salamu ala Rasulillah. And may blessings and peace be upon the Messenger of Allah. So, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of conversation with the author for ILS, that's Islamic Literary Society. So let me introduce Brother Mohammad. And I think the way to do it, really, and we're looking at his book as well, called Border Crossings, My Journey as a Western Muslim, that's the subtitle. And I think a nice way of introducing him would be just to read from the Dust Jackets, because there's a little biography at the back. And so Mohammad Chowdhury was one of the first British-born Bangladeshis to study at Oxford, where he read politics, philosophy, and economics, following which he completed a master's in economics at Cambridge, and later on executive training at Harvard Business School. Having worked in over 80 countries, advising ministers and CEOs, Chowdhury is now a senior partner at a global consulting firm in its practice across Asia and Australia. He's recognized as a leading emerging markets technology expert by the BBC, the Financial Times, and Forbes. Okay, well, welcome, Brother Mohammad, and over to you. I mean, is there anything you want to add to that biography before we start our conversation?
Oh, so alaikum salam, Brother Shahnawaz. Thank you very much for you and to the ILS for welcoming me today. And I've nothing further to add to the biography. It's a little bit embarrassing to have it read out, but it's nothing further to add. But I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. So thank you again for having me.
Great. Okay, alhamdulillah. So, well, really, I would like to very much treat this as a conversation rather than an interview of any sort, or just me asking questions and you responding. I've read your book, and alhamdulillah, really all sorts of very, very interesting things to say and to ask and to look at. But I mean, if we did that, it would take us a very large amount of time, really. So what I thought, I want to start with, inshallah, with in some ways it's one of the sort of primary reasons for ILS being set up, according to its founder. And he just clarified that really one of the primary reasons for the activities of ILS is to try and encourage others to read and to write. And so I guess there's an element of people taking inspiration and learning from these meetings, these conversations, you see. And if I may just give my own experience in reading this, I mean, it took me a fair amount of time to read the book. I think one of the reasons is that actually in modern times, we're not accustomed to, well, I'm speaking from my own experience, but we're not so accustomed to reading a book from cover to cover. I mean, I think most of us probably do an awful lot of reading in terms of just snippets from the internet and from articles and from comments on videos and so on. But in terms of actually sitting down and reading a book from cover to cover, it's, I think perhaps all of humanity have lessened in this activity, you see. So I was surprised in some ways the amount of effort it actually takes to read a book, even if it's very enjoyable, because that level of concentration that I think we've moved away from. So, but the other reason, and probably this is the bigger reason for why it took me so long to read, is because there were so many resonances, you see, for me, and so many connections, and it set me off, actually. So I would read a paragraph, and I would say, for instance, remember my time in, say, a town in Bangladesh and so on. But perhaps I should mention also, for the sake of the viewers, that we're both of Bangladeshi origin. We're roughly the same sort of age, although I'm a few years older than you. But alhamdulillah, we have some connections as well. I mean, as I just mentioned, I mean, I was at Cambridge many years ago for my first degree, so we have that connection as well. Brother Mohammad, as you heard, is from, he did his first degree in Oxford, but then Cambridge and then Harvard, mashallah. We have connections, as I said, in terms of Bangladesh. There's also a little bit of professional connection. I'm a psychotherapist, actually. I'm a psychotherapist and an imam, a Jummah imam. But I did work in the city in London. I was training as a chartered accountant for a little while. Touche Ross. I don't know if you Touche Ross, did they? Yeah,
would be
it's all
Deloitte
yeah,
now.
Deloitte Touche now. Yeah, exactly. So there are all sorts of resonances. Now, so Brother Mohammed, what I'd like to ask you really as a start is, and how did you manage to find the time to write? How long did it take, actually, if you don't mind me asking? How long did the whole process from, say, conception to birth take? And how did you manage to find time? Because of course, we understand that you're extremely busy. I mean, this going around like 85 countries or whatever it was that you've worked in. How did you manage it? And I think that would be inspiring for us to hear, inshallah. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Shahnawaz. So, so firstly, just in terms of how busy I am, I mean, I think pre-COVID, where all the travel patterns changed completely, I think for the last 15 odd years, I would have been averaging about 120 flights per annum. And so probably in any one year visiting 15 or 20 different countries in a year on average. So fairly busy from that perspective. Now, in terms of the writing, it was all done while working, if you like. I never took time off to write the book, and I sort of wrote it. It started with like a holiday, like an extended holiday I took back in about 2005 across the Middle East. And while I was traveling around southern Turkey, all of Syria, parts of Lebanon, and then into sort of the West Bank and Jordan during this trip, I was writing like a travel blog, if you like. And that was sort of a couple of thousand words every day. I did that for about a month, and I put it all together, and then I had no plans to write a book, brother, at that stage.
Right,
I
okay,
literally just put it together as a piece of travel writing, because I was quite interested in writing, and I used to travel a lot. So it sort of came naturally to me to do some travel writing. But then I showed it to a few people, including the late Robert Fisk, who used to be the chief Middle East correspondent of The Independent at the time. He, of course, just died about a year ago. And he said to me that he said you're not Mark Twain, so you don't write as well as he did about Damascus, because he lived in Damascus for a while and wrote there. He said, however, there is something that Mark Twain isn't, and I'm not, which is that you are a man of color, and you speak a few languages, and you have an ability to sort of get into connecting with people. If you're in a village in Lebanon or something, you're somehow able to connect with people, and that comes across in your writing. And that is a skill that few have. But then at the same time, whilst you're connecting with these people and you're able to earn their trust, you're also observing them with a Western type of lens, like you've grown up in the West, and you have a way of looking at things which people like me, he was saying, can relate to. So he said that's quite unique. So you need to do something about that. So Brother Shahnawaz, what I then did was I got a bit inspired by that, and so without any real plan, I started writing more, and it was basically written in about 18 months,
Wow.
basically during flights and sitting in hotels and restaurants in evenings in various parts of the world. That's how it was written. So it was written while moving around, if you like, across doing a full-time job and across about 18 months. I then finished it. Whatever I finished back then was probably a bit rough and ready, if you like, but it was a first draft. And then there were various refinements over the years until we ended up with the final book.
Wow. No. Well, that is inspiring, alhamdulillah. I mean, hearing that you 18 months, wow, I wouldn't have guessed. I really wouldn't have guessed. I'd have thought, yes. I mean, I guess as you say, you had the
I mean, I have to say that I can see the reason for your surprise, because I wouldn't claim it was what you've read is 18 months worth of work,
No.
because in a sense, more work's been done on it since.
Right.
I finished it by 2008, and then we didn't actually get into publishing it until 2017 or something. And so I then did do a fairly significant update and recut of the book. And that was quite substantial. So there were periods of time more recently where I would have put, a couple of months of extra effort into refining it. So more effort had gone in over the years. But the first rough draft was about 18 months when I got it done.
Wow. Okay, alhamdulillah. And to have Robert Fisk as an inspiration, that's rather nice as well, isn't it? I mean, I had a lot of respect for him, actually.
Yeah, I think it was really quite important in that journey of mine towards coming to write, because I would always have thought that my first book would probably be like a business type of book, but
Right. Yeah.
Robert Fisk has got a lot to I had a big role in this, because he was someone I looked at. I didn't necessarily agree with everything he wrote, and I didn't necessarily subscribe to all of his theories. However, I sort of admired him for his insight into topics or issues, and his sense of understanding things, even if I didn't agree with everything he said. And so, little old me, who's an unknown person, and then somebody like him takes the time to read my work and comment on it, and then offers to meet me.
Wow.
I mean that's saying a lot. And I'm inspired by people like him, and so to then have him comment, I think just meant a lot to me.
Of course.
And it made me feel like, well, maybe I can write a book. Why not? And I think there is an element of confidence, almost, or belief,
of course,
which is that, well, if I want to do something, then inshallah, let's give it a go.
Wow. So you hadn't actually met him until he got to. How did he get to read your material then?
So what happened was, I probably learned some of this from my own father, because he used to do this. I'd seen him doing it when I was a younger man. So what I did was I literally printed it out, what I had, which was probably about 40 pages of A4, and stapled it, and I sent it to the independent newspaper care of Robert Fisk.
Right.
And I had no idea whether it was going to get to him or not. And of course, our systems in the UK are so brilliant, in the way that things just happen. So that did get sent to him. And then, of course, he read it, and he sent me a letter, which was like a 3-page typed letter of comments on my writing, including correcting me for some of my geographical mistakes about Lebanon, because I'd named a mountain range wrong. And he said to me, this is not that mountain range you're referring to. That's another one. And so he actually, I mean, I was amazed. But this is what continues to inspire me about the world, which is that there are these people you can reach out to who you don't even know. Yeah. And every now and then, it doesn't happen all the time, but every now and then, they will respond to you. Yes. And I think for people like me, that's just very inspiring.
And I
try and learn.
Sorry, go on.
Try and learn from myself as well.
This is such. I mean, I find this so useful, because I mean, again, going back to this idea that some of these conversations, it's therefore, in order to sort of encourage and perhaps inspire people who are thinking in terms of writing, potential authors and so on. But to hear something like that, it's so valuable. It's so valuable because, you know, I mean, had you said that, well, yeah, what if to say if I was an author or a potential author and you said to me, oh, try sending some material to Robert Fisk, I mean, when he was alive, try sending, and he might respond. I probably would just think, oh, come on, you know, he's just at too high a level to be bothering to say, read my stuff. But it happens. And, you know, clearly, alhamdulillah, so it's, and if you don't try it, you don't get, I guess. So this is, and again, I'd just like to clarify, I mean, one of the reasons that I was so happy to do this conversation with Brother Mohammed, I'm speaking to the viewers now, that is I met him at my local masjid a few months back in Redbridge, and he was talking about his book then, and I think I just happened to stay that evening after, I think it was after Isha, wasn't it? I can't remember. So, but anyway, and one of the things I thought, and I did share this with you, but I'm going to say it out explicitly as well, Brother Mohammed. I hope you don't mind this, because but you know, I really do believe that someone like Brother Mohammed is potentially a huge inspiration to the young in our community, you see, because really, I mean, I think, alhamdulillah, you're pretty modest about it, pretty humble about it, but you've reached a very high level professionally, for instance. I mean, you know, being a senior partner at, can we name the firm, or would you prefer not to?
Of course, yeah, it's PwC.
Yeah, you know, yeah, because I noticed in your book you don't actually mention them by name. So, but okay, yeah, PwC, huge consulting company, well known. To reach senior partner level, alhamdulillah, this is no mean achievement. But to do that, and also to maintain, as we will discover, inshallah, your Islamic identity, your background as someone of Bangladeshi origin, you know, really for young, say for instance, young Asians, young, more specifically, I guess, Bangladeshis, but it doesn't have to be specific to that, but really to see what possibilities, what potential exists in this world. That's very hopeful, you see, and very, very inspiring. So yes, I think just, so, you know, I know you are a bit sort of, let's say, modest in this area, but I think, you know, letting people know really what you're doing professionally, say, and I mean, it's just a matter of fact, we just say alhamdulillah, and you know, so we know that the Prophet sometimes he would say things like, you know, the best of you are, and then he would say, and I am the best, and then he'd say, and I'm not boasting, on other occasions, you know, like he'd say the best of you are the ones who are best to their wives, their family, and I am the best. And other occasions he would say, I am the foremost in whatever, and then he would say, and I'm not boasting, because these were matters of fact. So I think as long as we, you know, yeah. Go on.
If I can just come in there, thank you for taking my prompt. If I could just come in there, I think you're making a very valuable point, brother, because many of us come from community backgrounds where we perhaps have, you know, less role models, if you like, in life than people from other more established communities in our countries might have. So, you know, if I was a white Englishman living in London, it's possible that I would have more role models to refer to in the professional world than if I'm a Bangladeshi who's from the first generation of Bangladeshis like you, like me, who went to university in the UK in large numbers. So, so I think there is that lack of role models out there for many of us, and I myself would have had a lack of such role models myself when I was a kid. So I think it is important to be able to use your own achievements in a way that can try and provide some service to others. And I don't regard it as immodesty. So I completely agree with you. I mean, I'm quite happy to tell people when it is either me or they or others who are really good at something, because it can help sometimes instill a greater degree of self-confidence or belief that, you know, we can get something done, which they may otherwise be lacking a little bit. So even at work with my team, you know, at PwC, where I'm based in Australia, I'm constantly telling them, you're really good at this, and we're really good at this, and we're going to get this done, you know, and that helps, especially some of the younger members of the team, get that extra sense of belief. And I think doing that in the community is more important because we probably need more role models.
Yes. Good. Okay. Okay. Now, all right, moving on to another area, related area, really, in terms of yourself and the book. I was quite, and this is probably, I mean, I can't help not bring my psychotherapy hat or my hat into this, I'm afraid. You know, it's gonna creep in some ways, but not as a psychotherapist, but more as, you know, someone who's really interested in people's motivations and their functioning and so on. But I know you actually you answered this partly because of that description that you gave of keeping the travel log and so on. But yes, the question was going to be that what was it that, I mean, what are your motivations and intentions in terms of publishing this book? I mean, who are you trying to reach, and for what reasons? It'd be good to hear a little bit about that, inshallah, if you may.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very good question.
Mm-hmm.
Once I had made that effort to write the book, and I didn't really think about publishing until I'd written it, if you like. I then came to the view, and I showed the book once it was finished to a few people in the sort of literary industry, and I quickly came to the view that, well, given the messaging, it's a book that probably needs to have an opportunity to reach a wider range of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore I thought, well, publishing is probably the right thing to do rather than not publish. So that was the first choice. The second one then was to publish through an established publisher as opposed to self-publish.
Right.
And the rationale for me there was I'd like the book to have the benefit of wider distribution, wider reach, if you like, to different markets. You know, whether it's in the UK, when you think about the different channels through which books are distributed, you know, through bookstores, online, Kindle, etc., or indeed different markets. And I sort of thought, well, I'd like it for the book to have the opportunity to be distributed as widely as possible. So all of those led me to think, well, we need to have an established publisher behind it. And a self-publisher, of course, wouldn't give me the opportunity easily to do that stuff. I mean, if I went on self-published with Amazon, for example, it would join millions of other books which are there in that regard, and it wouldn't necessarily get visibility. So that's why I took that approach. Now, being a brand new author, even though I'm somebody who's known in my own industry, I'm not known as an author. That was setting myself a pretty difficult challenge, which was to get a decent publisher and then take that route. But alhamdulillah, that's more or less what happened. It did take time, and the book did go to a few publishers in the interim. But alhamdulillah, that's what happened. Now, so to answer your question, I think what I wanted was to reach a few different, what I'm going to call segments of population, if you like. So one would be young Muslims, and young Muslims who are living in countries where they or their family members have migrated to, you know, might be their parents' generation or even themselves. So it's Muslim migrants to the West, you know, if you like. Like I think the book and its content would appeal more to them than it would to a Muslim who was born in Bangladesh and is living in Bangladesh and has never moved overseas, if you like. There's less to relate to. So firstly, it was that. And when I say young, I mean up to our age. I know that isn't necessarily that young, but really up to that sort of age that we're at, I think would be relevant.
Right.
Now, the second one, Brother Shahnawaz, would be actually not Muslims at all. but really to anybody
Mm.
who has experienced being an outsider. In other
Mm.
words, someone
Mm.
who's excluded somehow from the
Sure.
society that they have lived in or have grown up in. So I've had people saying to me that they've related to the book who are Polish migrants to Australia, who, if they had a religious denomination, it would be Christian. I've had that commentary from different denomination Africans who live in different European countries who've said, hey, I really related to your book because it made me think about my stories. So the second segment was people who've experienced being an outsider. And then the third would be curious readers, people who are interested in these sorts of topics. They may not necessarily fit into one of those first two categories, but they may still be people who are very interested in cross-cultural reading and discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found from all of those three segments, there have been many interested readers. However, reaching those segments requires a slightly different approach for each one. And part of the reason why, as you know, I'm planning, a little trip to the UK and to Europe in a few weeks' time, is specifically to reach out to the first of those three segments, which is
Right.
the young Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And that I've found, and we were there at the same evening in Redbridge about 3 months ago, is that there might be a way to reach out to some of those younger generation Muslims through the masjids and through the mosques. Now, not necessarily it'll be the same everywhere, because the communities are different as you go to different towns and cities. But certainly the intention is to try and reach out to that particular community through that sort of activity. Reaching the other segments, again, it requires slightly different strategies to reach them.
Okay, and when you say reach out, okay, and reach out and what though? I mean, reach out and share, reach out and entertain, reach out and inspire. I was just wondering and I guess this is quite a personal question in some ways, because I guess I'm asking what is it that you're hoping others will get from it? Is it, I mean, are you just, yeah.
It's a good probing question, and I think that I think a couple of angles on this one, brother. So one would be, it's an attempt to try and be a catalyst, and what I mean by that is to tell you a bit about my story, and my book is my story. However, it's written with an intent to stimulate you, the reader, into your own story, right? So that's really the intent, and part of the reason why the many of the incidents I write about are written in some detail is because I'm really trying to take you to that position or to that location, to that moment. That's part of what I'm trying to do, and I'm doing that because I think it's only by doing that that I might be able to get you to start thinking, oh, I've been there. And yours, of course, will be your own story. It won't be my story. It'll be a different location, a different time, but there'll be something in there that will just trigger you to start thinking about your story. So what I'm really trying to do is shine a light on your story, not on my story, to be honest. So that's like the attempt. That's one. Now, you might not want to let me off the hook with that, and you might want to say, well, is that everything, or is there something else? And I think there is something else. I think there is an element of me, with all due humility and modesty, probably wanting to sort of share my story a bit, because I think I've been through quite a bit, and I think I've learned a lot from it. And I don't think I've learned everything. I think I'm still doing the learning job for sure. But there is an element where I'm saying, you know what, I think there are bits of the story which are probably worth telling, and I think it will entertain. So I think some of my stories, without doing too many spoilers on the book, of course, are incidents or relating incidents which do get a bit hairy, do get a bit stressful or do get a little bit tense at times. And I am attempting to entertain through those, and entertain and engage for sure. So I certainly wanted the book to be engaging and page turning as well as being that connection, if you like.
Well, I mean, again, to share my experience of reading your book, I mean, it certainly fulfilled that description that you gave of, you know, wanting to stimulate reflection on one's own journey. There were so many scenes, so many descriptions that you were giving, which really I connected to. I mean, there were similarities and differences as well. They're really very much, you know, there were situations where you'd been in an almost identical situation, but your experience of it and what followed was so different from, say, my experience. I found, you know, but it led to that sort of reflection, and it was, and you know what, one of the things it left me with is, and I'm just thinking out loud at the moment in some ways, that it left me with this desire to just actually, without having a podcast or anything like this, just to speak with you, you know, just to, I guess, to share, you know, as you say that. I think sharing is a fundamental human need. So yes, I don't know if we'll ever get that opportunity to just sit down for a few hours and just chat and just, you know, go through some of those situations and experiences and just chat. But yes, it certainly, I think, yes. Now the thing is, though, all right, if and you described those three sort of categories just now, so that and you're focusing for the time being mainly on, let's say, the Muslim youth or whatever. Now, how would you, I mean, given that I think it is a reality, and I mean, unless your experience has been different from mine, but it seems to be a reality that people are not really reading very much. I mean, I did wonder, like, for instance, there was quite a lot of interest in your book on that occasion, and quite a few people actually queued up to get your book and get signed copies and so on. But I have to say, it did cross my mind. I wonder how many of those people have actually now gone ahead and read the book from cover to cover, because this activity is, I mean, I personally think there's not enough of it in our community to start with, but also in terms of the way the world has evolved, you know, and with other forms of stimulation and so on. I think it's much reduced. So how are you? Any thoughts on how you're going to reach and engage, let's say, the Muslim youth? I mean, if they're not even going to read the book, you see.
I think there are a few ways. I do agree with your comment about you know, a lower degree of readership, if you like, than we might have had in the past. So there are a few ways, I think, brother. So firstly, I'm doing these talks and doing these sort of tours, if you like, of mosques, etc. That's a big effort for me because, as many of you readers might be aware, I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, which is, you couldn't get further away from the UK than that if you tried. So, so it's a bit of an effort. But I do, inshallah, plan over the next couple of years to, you know, invest a bit of effort, if I can, to get around. And it's not just the UK, to be honest. I mean, even on this trip, I'll hopefully be doing a couple of readings, one in Rome and one in Amsterdam, I'm hoping for. And next year, I'm planning on focusing a bit on the US, and of course in Australia once the book publishes here in paperback form, which will be hopefully in a few months' time. Now, the second approach, I think, is audiobook. So there is quite a bit of demand for an audiobook.
Right.
And so
okay. Yeah.
there are some thoughts around an audiobook coming out in a few months' time. Again, there are some commercial considerations around, you know, when to go to an audiobook and so on, but I think that's all sort of in hand at the moment in terms of being planned through. And thirdly, I think I'm always open to other ways in which the word could spread. And I'm not necessarily thinking, brother, that everyone necessarily needs to read the book. I think it's more about, you know, how is it that work of this type, and I'm not saying it should be my book only, but work of this type can stimulate that sort of discussion. Now, there might be a lot more discussion about it than there would be individuals who read the book, if you see what I mean. But I think if discussion can happen in bigger numbers, I think that would be important. So I think that's what I've got at the moment. But I'm always interested in discovering other ways. And so, for example, even podcasts such as this and others are great opportunities. And I've done a few. And I'm planning to do more, so that there are good opportunities. There is, of course, the constraints of time, but I'm certainly happy to invest the time at the moment because, alhamdulillah, I mean, a lot of effort and a lot of determination went into publishing the book in the way that we published it, with a recognized publisher and so on. And so I'm actually really enjoying the journey of not having to write the book anymore, but just talk about it and so on. That's actually quite fun. Apart from hopefully being useful and meaningful, it's also a lot of fun.
Yes. And just to add a comment, if I may, on these sort of different categories of people that you want to reach. I had the thought whilst I was reading it at one point. I was thinking this would be so valuable in some ways to let's say, the majority community in certain situations. I mean, you're talking of, engaging with the minority community, and of course, people, again, they can share your experiences, of course. But you see, in terms of giving, say, like a majority community in a country where, let's say, there's racism and so on, and you've described a number of sort of racist situations and so on, to give them some inkling of what it actually feels like to be you see, I thought that would be really valuable. I mean, and I'm just sharing the thought that having as part of your readership, I mean, I agree with this thing you're saying about sort of the Muslim youth and so on, but actually having in some ways, the majority, the other side in some of those interactions, being able to empathize with you see, because there's so much scope for that, you see, from the book, because you describe things, and you go into quite a lot of personal detail at times, like describing, for instance, the difficulties in toilet usage, for instance, whether it's in Bangladesh on one of those sort of holes in the ground type things, or in other situations where you haven't got the means to, we don't have the means to, or ready means to clean ourselves in the way we would want to. I mean, those sort of things, a lot of people, I mean, just because they don't have any experience with it, they have no idea. They have no idea, you see. And
so I think that's a good point. And I think part of the reason why I go into detail about the toilet experience, if you like, and some of it, of course, hopefully is a bit funny as well, but the part of the reason why I go into that is exactly for that sort of reader. So you're quite right, brother. That isn't necessarily appealing to the Muslim reader, because the Muslim readers, the Muslim reader can perhaps relate to that and go, oh, right, okay, I've been through this.
Yes.
But like a non-Muslim reader, like, as you say a reader from the majority population in a country like the UK, would go, oh my word, I had no idea that this is what they need to deal with, right? So that could be very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've got my third segment, which is the curious reader, right? Which is not necessarily a Muslim, not necessarily a migrant or somebody who's felt like they're on the outside. It's actually somebody who's curious and is interested in this. And that's exactly what I mean by that.
Yeah.
And I think if it is possible for the book to get more exposure there, it would be wonderful. Now, I have to say, from personal experience, getting exposure there is difficult because there's a lot of competition for a little bit of attention space.
Oh,
and
right.
if you're not a well-known author and all that, it's even harder. However, I am encouraged. So, there are reading groups in a few parts of the UK who've read the book and reviewed it and talked about it, who are from that curious category,
Right.
not from the thinking
Right.
categories, right? There is a reader group in Oxford University who've read the book recently and published a really interesting review of it online. I'm currently trying to line up a couple of bookstore readings in the UK during July. I've done a couple of corporate readings in Australia,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
planning a
Okay.
corporate reading in the city in London in July. And so definitely, I think getting the word out about how Muslims adjust to the West in their own way to that broader community, I think is a great opportunity, actually. And I don't think I've really been able to exploit that opportunity as much as I would like. And hopefully there'll be more opportunities to do so soon, you know.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And on that note, I would just, if you don't mind, there's one quote which I would like to mention because, oh, maybe not. Where did I put it? Oh, okay. No. Sorry. I'm just going to find this quote because, and I'd like to share this with the readers because it's there were a number of quotes from the book which really were very, very moving. You know, I found, and there was this one you said, and it touches on this thing about the toilet. Okay, I'll just read it out. I can't remember what page, or I haven't written down the page number, but you said going to the toilet, eating, praying 5 times a day, all meant that being foreign wasn't an occasional challenge. No, we were foreign all day long. You know, I think it's lovely quote actually. That you know that's it's not just those little things, is it? It's not just sort of those minor things. It's a state that we exist in when we have these things to sort of deal with.
It's absolutely a constant state. It is it's from the moment you wake to the moment you go to bed that day. So it is, and I don't mean that in a way to say that it means that I'm conscious of being foreign all day. What I'm trying to say is that my way of life, my way of thinking, and my way of conducting myself is perhaps different because of the different moral and value-based architecture that I have in my life. Now, by the way, that moral and values-based architecture is not wholly different to the moral architecture of, say, the majority of British population or Australian population, etc. It's not necessarily foreign, but the way in which I think about it and live it is probably quite different, you know, because of my different cultural background, my different religious and faith background, etc. So I think in that respect, it's how we walk, how we eat, how we talk, you know, how we appreciate things, how we engage in discourse with others around us. I think there is a way in which the type of people we are is reflected in all of those types of activities. So yeah, so that's what I was really getting at when I was saying that, you know, you were foreign all day long, if you like.
Yeah, which leads me to another area that I did wonder about, and again, it's a bit personal, but you seem to be okay being quite personal. I mean, you know, there were phrases from the book or bits of the book where I was thinking, are you writing this as a sort of tragedy or comedy? You see, because certainly, I mean, there's pain there, I would suggest. I mean, obviously do correct me if I'm wrong, but there does seem, I mean, you know, and some of those experiences, and those of us been through those experiences, like some of the racist experiences, for instance, you know, that horrible sort of situation that you described very vividly, you know, of those people spitting at the car, and your mother being in the car and so on, and it's, I mean, many of us, I mean, I think those of us who are old enough to have been in the UK when those sorts of things used to happen. I think they're a lot less common now, from my understanding.
Yeah,
But you know, we have had those experiences. Now, obviously, those experiences are very painful. But some of these you present in quite a humorous way, actually. And I wondered what's your whether you were experiencing writing this as uh, or some of those scenes as painful or as humorous, or both, perhaps both, maybe. But I mean, do you feel that? I mean, I'd be interested
yeah.
to hear how, yes, your experience of it.
There definitely is an intention for a bit of dry humor
Ah,
there,
there is.
to be
Okay,
honest.
okay,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
So I think there is that sort of almost Monty Python-esque sort of
right,
streak, wanting to laugh at yourself whilst perhaps relating a tale that maybe isn't innately funny in itself, but perhaps to do it in a funny sort of way. So you're absolutely right. I mean, the sort of stories about being spat on while a school child, or having my car spat at, while we were on the way to school,
mm,
definitely wouldn't fit into that category. I mean, that really just was heavy duty trauma, if you like. However, being asked to, loosen my trousers and go through a full search while I'm at Boston Airport on that
yes,
particular afternoon that you might have read about.
yes,
There was a joke, and there was a bit of a joke shared between myself and the security officer that was doing the search that day as well, because
right,
he's the funny side of it as well, being, yeah, I've got this bearded Muslim in front of me. I've
right,
asked him to take me through all his bag, and yeah, everything's all good, but he's got this sort of slightly cheeky smile breaking out on his face at the same time, and we both know what that joke is, without even having to say it, which is
right,
that, yeah,
right,
okay, here I am, and here you are, and we're sort of playing out this sort of almost role.
yeah,
And yeah, and in all honesty, you're doing an important job, and you need to do your job. And I'm also cooperating with you to do that job.
right.
But I'm seeing a slightly ironic, funny side to this, and so are you. And so there is an element of that coming out where I can as well, for sure.
Ah, right, okay, okay, good, good. Because I mean that scene. I mean, these aren't. I guess these aren't spoilers because we're not giving away what happens. But that scene where the guy draws the gun at you, and says "eat." I mean, was that
Yeah.
was that terrifying, or was that humorous? I mean, did you know it was humorous at the time, or was it just
No, I don't think it wasn't humorous at the time at all. However, it I wouldn't say it was terrifying. I'd say it was frightening, but it was also, I was gobsmacked by the situation.
right?
Here I was, I was probably about 26 years old during that scene.
Oh, right,
So I'm
okay,
not particularly mature at that stage.
right,
And to be faced at gunpoint, at that age, and in this particular circumstances that it was happening at there, yeah, it was pretty frightening, to be honest.
mm,
But um, you know, I don't think I saw it as being funny at that stage. However, I would say that I do remember at that moment thinking, I could just be at home right now in London watching TV, because it was a Sunday afternoon.
right,
I do remember thinking, yeah, I could just be at home right now, sitting in front of the TV watching the football. Why
right.
am I here at
Yes.
gunpoint? I do remember thinking that at the exact moment that it happened.
Excellent, excellent. Now, okay, on that note, I think I would like to just plug the book a bit, if you don't mind. I'm sure you don't mind. I mean, because of course we've been talking with. I mean, you obviously having extreme familiarity with the book, and me having some familiarity, having read it. But our viewers probably don't know what the book is about. You see, so could I just read from the Dust Jacket, or would you? Sorry,
Just
go on.
getting the noise. The noise has just come back
Oh,
in the last
sorry. Thank you
second.
for that. Oh,
Literally in
it's
the last 10
I'm
seconds.
sorry
Otherwise, it
about
was
this. It's I've got to find. I think I need to get one of those remote sort of headphones. Because okay, is that better now? Is that okay?
This is good.
Oh, it's good. All right. Okay. It's just I've got to keep it
If I
away.
see it again, I'll just put my hand up. So
Please,
you
yeah.
know.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So I was just saying that our viewers probably, I mean, that they're not as familiar with the book unless they've actually read it as we are, well, certainly as you are, and myself to some extent as well, because I've read it. But so could I just read from the dust jacket about how you describe the book, or do you want to read it? I mean, it'd probably be better. Do you want to read it? Just yeah, I think let's hear your voice rather than mine. Yes, just that. I was referring to that one on the initial page, or the the weather navigating. Yeah, on the first page on the dust jacket.
Absolutely. Whether navigating the mind games of the Israeli intelligence services, performing ablutions in a London bathroom, or disembarking at JFK Airport in New York, Mohammad Chowdhury's life as a British Muslim traveling the world brings daily challenges. Border Crossings is the story of Chowdhury's journey, gripping in some parts and shame-inducing in others, as he describes a lifelong struggle to reconcile the British, Asian, and Muslim sides of his identity, constantly dealing with mistrust in Western countries, alongside the hypocrisies of his own community in observing the principles of Islam. Chowdhury's story echoes the experience of thousands of Western Muslims who, since 9/11, have been subjected to a barrage of questions that cast doubt over the very goodness of their faith. It is the story of a man who cries with pride when England win the Ashes, yet screams in the face of racism and religious bigotry. This timely book powerfully rejects the divisive narrative that Muslims can no longer be trusted as honest citizens of the West.
Yeah. That's nice. Actually, would you mind reading the thing on the back as well? Because I think again that offers a more sort of emotional description of the book and your journey. If you wouldn't mind, yeah. I mean, I would read it, but I think it comes a bit better coming from you.
Throughout my life, I have occupied the cultural no man's land I was stuck in ever since school days. Over time, I have become aware that embracing the challenge of handling cultural ambiguities breeds advantages in communication and empathy. Border Crossings is my journey, but the narrative is my way to relate to yours.
Thank you. Great. Now, just wondering, did writing the book, I know this is a bit of a sort of cliche question, but I'd like to ask it anyway, but did writing the book bring you some sort of healing or some therapy, to use that word, in terms of those painful experiences? I mean, having it on paper and sharing, and even without knowing whether it was going to reach people, but just writing it, was that like cathartic in itself, or more deeply healing in some ways, or will it need engagement, do you think, with actual people?
I think writing it was healing for me, even without the action of it being published and reaching others. And I'd say it was a bit like ironing a very creasy shirt, if you like. You know, a shirt that's got lots of wrinkles in it, and ironing it out takes a bit of time and a bit of effort. But doing so and resulting then in a shirt that's flat can provide a sense of satisfaction to the person who's doing, at least in my case, to the person who's doing the ironing. And I think it was a little bit like that, because what writing the book forced me to do was to think about those incidents a lot harder. So in a sense, when I'm writing about the experiences of either being searched at an airport, or suffering some sort of racial abuse, or indeed figuring out how to go to the toilet, and whilst remaining compliant with Islamic practice, if you like. Every time I'm writing about that stuff, I'm thinking about, well, why did I do that, and why did I why did I open the door like that? And why did I go and buy that bottle of water before I went there? And how? And so in a sense, I think thinking all that through helped me, if you like, rationalize a lot of the life that I'd experienced myself. So that, I think, was healing in itself, number one. Number two, and you mentioned cathartic. So was there an element of sort of getting stuff off my chest, if you like, by writing it? I think there would have been an element of that, brother, in my first draft. So my first draft would have been a bit more like the sort of just chucking stuff out, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like when you run a rusty tap and you get a sort of rusty water coming out first,
Yeah.
and then the clear water comes out later.
Yeah.
So I think there was an element of throat clearing and getting some stuff out of the way there. I don't believe much of that is left in the finished product, if you like, but certainly I benefited from doing some of that myself, for sure. And then I think, other than that, I'd say there was just this huge satisfaction, if I may say so, from having the opportunity to then see that that is going to get published, and therefore giving it that extra effort of the writer's polish, if you like, to sort of say, look, this is going to be read by a lot of people, so let me really make sure that I've been able to articulate this in a way that's fair and reasonable, given the intended message. And of course, that was not a lonely task. That was a task where I was helped by a great team, if you like, from the publisher and my agent, who all put good amounts of serious effort into reviewing it multiple times and giving me comments and prompting me to rethink certain passages, which they did, with great thoroughness.
Excellent. Yes. Now I'm just aware of the time. I don't want this to cut out before we touch on certain things. So I'm just going to jump ahead now in some ways, in terms of, I guess, in terms of hope. It's looking, because the way I read it, and as I said, is that you've in some ways you found solutions. Not in some ways, you found solutions to these conflicts that you were experiencing. Yeah, not necessarily always by yourself. I mean, that again, without sort of touching too much because of the spoiler thing, but that last chapter and that last description was, I found, so moving, and also so hopeful, really, and in some ways a bit even surprising. I mean, what actually the way the people interacted with you, the way they engaged with and responded to you, I don't think we could necessarily have guessed, you see. So in some ways they helped you arrive at a sort of solution in some ways. Yeah, I mean, so I think this happens in life, doesn't it? We can try and look for solutions ourselves. We can try, and sometimes we try and think through our problems, or try and solve our problems through our minds, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't always. It may not happen. It can happen in some situations. We can think through, but sometimes we do need others. Of course, we need others, and ultimately, of course, we're relying on Allah. But so yes, so but the feeling I got was that, and I guess the fact that you wrote the book, or that you were ready to write the book, perhaps it is a sign that you had arrived at solutions and resolutions to these conflicts, because I'm not sure how easy it would have been to write the book whilst you were in the midst of some of those conflicts and difficulties and searching, because I guess you were a lot of the book, and again, please just correct me if this is on the wrong lines, but to me was it's about identification. It's sort of, wanting to know, I mean, this fundamental question that we all need to ask and try and find solutions to is, who am I? Who am I? Now, I think alhamdulillah, you got there. I mean, it's a lifelong process, of course, but it seemed that there was some resolutions and some solutions. Now, So do you think others can apply similar processes? I mean, could the book serve as a way, and I think you've already answered this, to be honest, but it'd be good to hear it from you again, that could it serve as a model for other people to follow, or do you think everyone has to have their sort of own journey? I mean, could this serve as a sort of example of how it is possible to reconcile some of these differences?
I hope so. I think these are differences that we all deserve as individuals to have resolution for, and of course there will be a very personal element to those gaps or differences that each of us feel that is ours and ours alone. And Allahu kulli shay'in qadir. I mean, we don't know when is it that we might find that resolution, because events will unfold and happen in a way that suddenly get us to realize that we've just made a leap of some sort to close what was a gap in our lives, and that's partly what happened to me, as I would have related in the book. But yes, I certainly hope that the reader does take away that there is resolution, and you at least here is an example of somebody who, you know, might have been faced with challenges but has landed, if you like, on a conclusion, you know, that is meaningful for him. So yeah, I hope so. Uh, and I think the other thing I would add would be part of the reason of going into all that detail around unpacking some of those topics, you know, like, for example, the dilemma over how to wash that glass, you know, in the restaurant and all that sort of stuff. Like, part of the reason why I go into that, unpacking that in a lot of detail, is to try and lay out, and I don't know what, I don't claim to get this right, by the way, but to try and lay out a step-by-step almost logic of, well, what exactly am I doing here? Why do I need to wash this glass in this way? Maybe I should do it the other way. And part of the reason of, brother, of laying it out in that way is to try and almost demonstrate that, you know, maybe if we stop sometimes to think through what we're doing and why, it will help us get to more of a resolution as to what we're doing. Yeah, so I think there was certainly an intention of that there. I don't know if I've been very articulate in that response, but I feel as though, yeah, and your questions are really good, and so I do look forward to that opportunity of sitting down with you for a few hours. I think it'll be very for me as well. If we
Great.
get that.
Not recorded though, I think. I mean, I think having it recorded adds a sort of I don't know, an element to it, which, I mean, I guess it is a way of other people sharing it, but it's a sort of, one is aware of the camera. That's the problem. I am. And okay, now, okay, one thing again, and this is something from me, I guess, but I would like to share this. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, inshallah, because it does very much connect to the book. And you know, there's this. It's strange though. It's strange how it came about, because you know, I guess there is this sort of idea of synchronicity. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but, or our viewers, but there is this sort of idea that certain things get connected, which are not causal. So one isn't causing the other, but somehow they're connected. And it was a term that was used by Carl Gustav Jung. He was, you know, he's one of these sort of, yeah, great, well, we say great, but he's one of the early developers of psychoanalysis and so on. But it's a nice idea. It exists in all sorts of cultures. And and we, I guess, as Muslims, it's not strange to us at all, because of course things are connected through Allah's will. So, you know, we don't, in some ways, we don't really believe in coincidences, because there's meaning to things. There's not, you know, things aren't happening randomly. But you know, it's very strange that one of the reasons that I had to ask for you know, for us to defer this meeting was because I think I mentioned to you, I was writing an article at the time. Did I? I don't know if I mentioned this to you. Maybe not. But I was asked to write an article for, because I'm like a trustee for a charity, called Global Acts of Unity. And it's a long story, which I won't go into, but they'd have a sort of like trustees corner, monthly for their newsletter. And they asked, it was my turn. And what I was looking at was how the founder of that charity, someone called Mike Haynes, and again, I'm not going to go into who he is, but he's, we became very good friends. I mean, we met almost 8 years ago, actually, and we've become very good friends, alhamdulillah. And he is someone, and yes, and the viewers can look this up if they want to as well. But he comes from a background. One of the things we've realized is that we come from very, very different backgrounds. You know, he's sort of white Scottish. He has a different religious background, cultural background. We have very different sort of educational and professional backgrounds, etc. So we're different in so many ways: race, color, ethnicity, etc. You know, some of the fundamental ones, religion, or background, that is. But you know, we amazingly sort of really hit it off, and I was sort of, and we are very close, and we're close, and we both tried to understand this. How did this happen? You know, how is it that given such differences, we've become so close now? And in trying to explore this, one of the thoughts I had was that, you know, of course, we can, as human beings, we can use difference very easily, as happened in your book with some of those sort of encounters, some of those situations. We can use difference as a way of say, being suspicious of people, almost sometimes paranoid of people, disliking people, even hating people. As human beings, we're quite capable of this. And we're capable of doing this sort of to more and more specific layers, that it could almost sometimes become like individuals, you know, because, like, you know, we can think of ourselves, like, for instance, we can think of ourselves as belonging to the group of, say, people of Bangladeshi origin. Okay, that's a fairly general group, yeah. But then, of course, we can differentiate, because you're from a Silesi background, I'm not, so we can have that differentiation. But then I can say, let's say, take you can differentiate between different regions of Sylhet, yes. And then within those regions, you can differentiate between different families. So we can, as human beings, we seem to be very capable of noticing differences amongst ourselves, and then acting on that in negative ways, like hateful ways, suspicious ways. And I'm pretty sure Shaitan plays his part in generating some of those sort of feelings, or not those feelings, but those attitudes, let's say. However, we can also do the opposite, you see, and this is, I guess, where unity comes, where, you know, rather than seeing ourselves, say, as, I don't know, being from two different villages of the same region of the kind of, we can think of ourselves as, we can reverse the process. So we can think of ourselves as belonging to that region, and then we can think of ourselves as belonging to, say, Bangladesh, or with another non-Bangladeshi Asian, we can think of ourselves as belonging to the group of Asians. And then rather than Asian, we can think of ourselves as belonging to the group of non-whites or whatever. So we can enlarge this group and enlarge it. And then to the extent that actually, I think we can think of ourselves as belonging to the group of human beings, of humanity. That may be at the sort of highest level in some ways, because that unifies us all. Yes, and it's an obvious thing to say, but I think we don't always keep this in mind, that actually, you know, whatever our differences of race, color, religion, creed, etc., we do actually belong to Bani Adam. Do you want to interrupt at that stage? You're thinking something. Do you want to say, or shall I finish?
No, it's up to you. You can finish, but I do have some thoughts which I'd love to
Oh yeah,
come in on.
no, I'm very much interested in what your thoughts are. I'll just finish this off, and then perhaps we can hear. So, I guess, I think in that, again, without spoiling it, that last scene that you described, I think you guys connected at the level of humanity, even though obviously there were other more specific connections. And this is what I feel in terms of my relationship with Mike. I think the reason that it's been possible, alhamdulillah, for us to become close in the way we have it, is because we've connected at the level of humanity. So those differences actually become secondary to the fact that we share common traits as human beings, you see. And some of those traits, I think, are things to do with like human qualities, like respect, like compassion, like affection, humor. I think humor has a unifying effect. So yes, so ultimately, in terms of, and of course, it reminds us of that verse from the Quran, really, in Surah Al-Hujurat, يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا فإن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. That, oh people, and it's very interesting that it's addressed to humanity, this verse. It's not addressed to the Muslims, just the Muslims. So, oh people, indeed we created you from a male and a female, and we made you into races or nations, races and tribes, so that you may know one another. Yes, so that you may know one another, recognize one another. Indeed, the most noble of you, the most honorable of you in Allah's sight is the most God-conscious or the most righteous, the one most taqwa. Indeed, Allah is knowing and all aware, knowing and aware. You see, so, which is, I mean, that verse to me, it really touches on this, I mean, areas of identity, areas, I mean, we have these differences, and there's no point, we don't want to sort of deny our differences, because they exist. Yes, and Allah has created them according to that verse. Some of those, we have made you into nations and tribes, or races and tribes, so that but what's the purpose? So that we may know one another, we may recognize one another. And I think if we can connect to that, a lot of these sort of difficulties that we experience in terms of, identity and conflicts with others, they can disappear, if we can connect to that level of humanity, inshallah. Anyway, those are my thoughts, but I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts in relation to that before we get cut off.
So I agree with what you've said, brother, and I think it's very well the way you've described it and illustrated it, and also underlined it with a quote from the Quran. I think it's very good the way you described it. My additional thoughts would be that I think that sometimes we can also just connect without having that almost concentric circle of connection that you've described. So you've sort of said Bangladesh, Asia, people who are maybe non-white, the whole world, which almost indicates a sort of radial element. But I also think, in addition to that, one can just connect anyway. So, if you're sitting here and you're a Bangladeshi of a particular background, there's no reason why you can't, in a moment, connect with somebody who's from a completely different religious and geographic and cultural background, because of that similarity of the condition of humanity. So there might be a particular thing that just suddenly connects you together, and crosses many boundaries all at once, and actually means that you both, for a moment in time, share something special that brings you together. And it might be spontaneous, it might be instantaneous, and it might be momentary, but it might, of course, be enduring as well. And so I'm a huge believer in that. And having had the opportunity to have traveled and worked in so many countries, I mean, if anything, I've learned that there are many, many reasons why that happens all the time, actually, and it's very, very, very enriching when it does happen. And I would say, in relation to your friendship with Mike that you've mentioned, which sounds really special, I can count amongst my best and dearest of friends many people that I've really related to through my life. And they're not necessarily sharing a lot of background with me in terms of race or ethnicity or religious background. In fact, on the upcoming trip I'm making to the UK, I'm really happy to say I'll be making a very special trip to one of Her Majesty's prisons to do a reading to prisoners.
Oh, wow.
Actually,
Okay.
and hopefully on the day after Eid. It's going to be a multi-faith event, but it's going to be one where, you know, a couple of us will be sharing perspectives and maybe doing a bit of reading. And the person who's bringing that about is an old friend of mine who I've referred to in the book a few times by the name of Andrew. And I've known him since I was 9 years old. So I've known him for more years than I care to confess on this call. But he and I, you know, we have a tremendously deep relationship on so many levels, even though we have, you know, different cultural background, different racial background, and a different religious identification as well.
Lovely. And thank you so much for that, you know, that comment on the concentric circles. And as you say, yes, it doesn't have to be that way. It's like having those sort of, do you remember at school, there's the Venn diagrams and so on. So you can have, I guess you can have two groups where there's intersection rather than it having to belong to, great. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
To belong. And you know, I work in my professional life, I work in the telecommunications and media and sort of digital world. And I find that post-COVID is happening so much now, which is that because of connectivity, being able to connect different individuals and businesses together is that the most interesting connections being made now between some business in a regional part of Australia suddenly now partnering with another business that might be on the opposite side of the globe, which they would never have discovered each other in that pre-COVID or pre-digital world. But now more and more of those connections are happening. So in my professional life, I sort of see that happening a lot as well, funnily enough, you know, in addition to my personal life.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to, I think I'm going to bring this to a close just because I'm worried that we're going to get cut off because there is a Zoom sort of limit, I think, and I don't want it to suddenly cut off. But I must say it's been a real pleasure, and really I've very much enjoyed this. And actually, it's hearing you speak about certain elements that has enriched the experience of reading the book. I mean, you know, I've gained in some ways more from the book now, having spoken to you, than when I just read it on my own. So, I mean, I guess that always happens, but it has happened. So really, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope it's been okay for you as well. You know, I don't think that any of those questions were particularly sort of, I know you used the word probing earlier, but I mean, it wasn't designed to sort of grill in any way. But
probing in a good sense, in
right.
the sense that I think it was your questions have been, you know, they've been getting to the heart of a few topics and getting us right into the detail, which I think has been really really valuable. And I've been very happy with all of the questions. As you can tell, if somebody's written a book about many of these aspects of their life, they're actually quite happy to sort of talk about them. So that's been absolutely fine. So
brilliant. And I really look forward to our meeting, inshallah, and when you come over. Yes, I will.
I really look forward to that. And I'd like to really just say, Brother Shahnawaz and Brother Hay and to the ILS, thank you for this opportunity to be able to engage in discussion and to be able to do it in a way that could be shared with hopefully many brothers and sisters who will consume this. So it's been a great opportunity, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity as well. So thank you.
Lovely. You're most welcome, and thank you again. So thank you all very much. Inshallah, see you soon.